Welcome to another edition of On My Couch, and today we're doing something slightly different. We're actually talking to one of our own, so our new senior associate, Trevor Dill. And so, welcome, Trevor. Thanks for joining us, and I'll do a bit of a bio of you in a minute and get you to add to that. At the end, we're keen to talk a little bit more about your role with OMC Group, but before we introduce Trevor. Maybe I'll throw to you, Sue, just to mix things up a little bit. Maybe introduce yourself first, and then I'll talk more about the episode.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit like an edition of Hard Quiz today because I've got 30 years in retail property and marketing, and obviously Trevor's very, very experienced in retail and property. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how we go in the hard quiz. Um, but currently enjoying a portfolio career now, obviously working with OMC Group and some not-for-profits and for-profits as a consultant and also as a board of director. So thanks, Damien, and looking forward to our hard quiz.
Yeah, good. We're all on note. All on note. Introduction. So my name's Damien O'Malley. I'm the founder of OMC Group, and what we do at OMC Group is we help people work better together. But a little bit more than that, what we really do is actually help them achieve what's possible, or help them achieve optimal performance, whether that be through leadership development, through team effectiveness, or through culture. But it's fundamentally about how do people work better together to achieve better outcomes as well. So what's on my couch? So on my couch we started about 3 years ago, and Sue and I were, basically wanted to talk with super smart people about topics which interest us, and this one's pretty close to home for you, Sue. So the intent is have a conversation, learn more about particular topics, and then we can apply them either in our work life or sometimes in our personal life as well. So that's the scene setting. Trevor, thank you again for joining us, and I'll get you to add to this summary. Currently, you're a corporate advisor with Precision Group. More importantly, senior associate with OMC Group, which is awesome. But prior to that, COO of Precision Group, Director Asset Management for Precision Group as well, General Manager Retail with Walker Corporation, Westfield, a number of roles, including New South Wales State Operations Manager, and then Woolworths, including roles as Regional Manager, Big W, and National Training Manager as well. So really pleased to have you join us. What we're keen to talk about today is leadership and managing large teams, retail and retail property development. So they're the themes. So before we get into that, maybe just, I've given a brief rundown of your career. Maybe just take a few minutes just to talk us through your career journey.
Thanks, Damien. It's been a long career in property, and it's sort of started out with the country kid that parents thought they'd do the right thing and move the family to Sydney, and had no idea, having finished high school, other than I wanted to work. And probably true to form, as of today, I was always motivated by money. I can remember going for a number of job interviews, and I settled on one with Woolworths as a management trainee, because I think they paid about $3 an hour more than a job with BP as a management trainee. Anyway, ended up with Woolworths out of just, well, what will I do? But as it turned out, that was a very fortuitous decision, and led to me spending 17 years at Woolworths, with a whole heap of different opportunities that such a big company like that presents itself. I had 2 or 3 years in a HR and a personnel role, which was mainly around recruiting, and I'll touch on that later on. But that was one of the best 3 years in terms of my development as an executive that I could have come across, in terms of being able to have a proper process for going through that recruitment selection process. But anyway, 17 years at Woolworths, as you touched, finished in a regional role, and at that point in time, a number of Big W execs had been poached to join Westfield, and then one of those guys who was in a general management role asked whether I'd like to join. Didn't think it was all that crash hot at the start. When he came back again about 6 months later, we had another chat. Anyway, long story, end up with Westfield, started with them in 87, and the part that helped me there, which is why the retail bit was so such a perfect opportunity, was that their brief at the time was that they wanted certain managers that had held senior roles within retail, because at the end of the day, a shopping centre is a whole collection of retail, and what better person to have as a centre manager, someone that has training in retail. Every retail business has different metrics, but basically, at least you had something, as opposed to somebody that came from some other industry. So the Woolworths bit gave me the step into Westfield, which was just a perfect marriage. And then after the 12, 13 years at Westfield, where I had experience in managing some of the biggest shopping centres in the country at the time, along came Lang Walker, who was just starting into retail property. I had an absolute fascination and full of admiration for the Lowy family and Westfield, and said to a headhunter, I just want the best Westfield guy you can get, because he saw Westfield people as walking on water. Anyway, that ended up with me starting with Lang. And that relationship, that partnership lasted for about 12, 13 years, until Lang decided to wind back his retail development and concentrate more on commercial. And then, having worked in both Westfield, publicly listed company, and then with Lang, which is a privately owned family company, Sean Bonnet from Precision Group made a call, because he had obviously a private company, but he wanted some of the disciplines and procedures that came from one of the bigger players, from one of the publicly listed REITs. And so that ended up with another marriage that lasted for another 12 years, and until I retired from that role middle of last year. So if I had sat down with a young guy and said, these are the areas that you should spend time in to end up in this position, as it turned out, it was just perfect. Firstly, the retail component, which allowed me to move across into property. That property being then with a publicly listed company, which then led to a privately owned company wanting to have me work for them, and then to another private company at the end. So very quickly, there goes 50 years of time, and it's been a wonderful experience.
Terrific.
But Trevor, if you've obviously had a front row seat to the evolution of retail within a career on both sides of the fence, what would you say are the biggest changes that you've seen, and what's been the most challenging shift for the industry to navigate over that tenure?
Good question, Sue. You could we could talk about that. We could talk about that for hours. But basically, shopping centres have, way back when I first walked into Westfield, Burwood in 1987, have reflected the communities that they serve. And as a result of that, as communities change, shopping centres change, and will continue to change. So if you go back to the 90s, we had strong department stores. We had very few what we call category killers or mini majors, but those businesses are now everywhere, whether it's a Mecca or a Sephora or a JB Hi-Fi or a JD Sports, Harvey Norman's. All those businesses have come into the industry and have changed it. And in the terms of those mini majors and their growing, that's been to the demise of the traditional department stores. And then along with that, we've seen the advent of the whole entertainment offering, as technology's brought online shopping to centres. The need for centres then to be able to offer their customer experiences that can't be bought online. We've seen that whole entertainment offering expand from cinemas to start with, to bowling alleys, to whole concepts, whether there's dodging cars, time zones. That has just grown And then, of course, we've now seen the growth of the luxury brands that have started to take their concepts out of the department stores and establish their own freestanding boutiques. So again, we could go on about that for ages, but the shopping centre will evolve. It's always the village green. It's always the town square. It's a place of mass gathering, and as communities change, then the shopping centre changes, and it will continue to change. I think the second part of your question, Sue, was about what are some of the challenges? Challenges for shopping centres haven't changed again a whole lot over the years. If you go right back to the start, it's very heavily legislated. In the 90s, there was a big push against landlords and their treatment of tenants, which led to retail legislation, which even today is so onerous on the landlord. We have to tell the tenant, for example, that his lease expires in 6 months' time. If we don't tell him that his lease expires in 6 months' time, then he's has an option to extend for another 6 months. Now, where else does it? It's your business. Surely it's up to you to know that you've got a lease and it's going to expire in 6 months' time. It's not up to the landlord. So that's just one silly small example to illustrate how it's so legislated. And then coupled with that, you have the whole development process of trying to get a shopping centre up and the approvals that have to go with that, whether it be environmental, traffic, all those sorts of impediments to getting a shopping centre built. Not to mention construction costs, which are going through the roof, and that's why today I can't think of a shopping centre under 50,000 square metres that's been built in the last 5 years. A new shopping centre that's built in the last 5 years, and that's because of those challenges that keep coming at the industry. You'll see small neighbourhood shopping centres, which is so a supermarket of maybe 4,000 or 5,000 metres and half a dozen 10 specialty shops around it. They still pop up, but ask yourself, when was the last time you saw in Melbourne a High Point or a Southland or a Doncaster, or in Adelaide a Marion or a Tea Tree Plaza, or in Sydney a Miranda or an East Gardens or a Macquarie? It just doesn't happen. The biggest deal in terms of that in Sydney is Rouse Hill, where they're going to spend $200 million extending that shopping centre, and that's in the main what's happening with the shopping centres, because trying to get a new one off the ground is just too hard. It's those challenges that we have. So not only have you got that, then you've got the online advent, where about 24% of retail sales are online. Bearing in mind that we always bought concert tickets online, we always bought airline tickets online. So it's probably slightly inflated, but that's a number that's been thrown around at the moment. So that's another challenge that the shopping centre business has got. And then, of course, there's the macro issues, whether it be interest rates or whether it be CPI, government legislation, geopolitical influences, the war in Iran at the moment, because that all impacts upon the consumer's confidence. That impacts upon their spend. That impacts upon the sales that the retailer gets, which in turn impacts upon their profitability and their ability to be able to pay the rent, which is what determines what the value of the shopping centre is and what return the investors are going to get on that shopping centre. So the challenges are not dissimilar to what they were all those years ago, back from '87. They just keep coming, and it's testimony to the resilience of the model. That in a way, the Lowies, John Saunders and Frank Lowy, had a lot to put together all those years ago. That's continues to be able to survive and overcome all those challenges.
So, Damien, do you want to just ask one more question about shopping centres, and then we'll move on to the teams?
Yeah, please. Yeah, because I was curious about, you touched on it a little bit, But the from an outsider, the relationship between the property group and its tenants. So what makes a strong relationship from your perspective, between the shopping centre and then the retail tenants. What makes a good relationship or a strong relationship between those two parties?
Yeah, that's a tough one, Damien. It's a good question, and it's really critical to how a successful shopping centre works.
Mm.
So in a shopping centre, let's say a sub-regional shopping centre, you've got at least 200 tenants. You're going to have a whole blend of retailers in there. You're going to have highly professional international retailers that really don't want to spend too much time with the shopping centre management team. They see them in some cases as an interference. They don't wish to talk about their business metrics or their performance openly. They have their own what you call it, egos, and think that they know the world. We've got X shops in the world. We've got shops in New York. We've got shops in London. Why do I need to talk to you, Mr. Centre Manager at, say, High Point in Victoria? So you've got that on one side, and you've then got the Australian publicly listed companies like a Woolworths or a Big W or Coles, where in a way the store managers have strict policies around confidentiality and what they can say to people outside the business. So if I want to talk to a Coles store manager about their sales and how various departments are performing, or what percentage of their business they're doing through click and collect, they're in a bit of a tough spot, because they've got head office telling them that you do not tell anybody about how we're performing. Whereas what I'm wanting to do is to build a relationship with that store manager that allows my team as a centre manager or as a group to be able to work with them and grow their sales. Grow their sales means more people into their store, means more people into the centre, means more people to the specialty stores outside his centre. So again, trying to get that rapport or that communication open it requires a lot of patience, a lot of trust. And a lot of skill in terms of being able to get someone to open up to you when he's got his boss on one side telling him, you tell anybody anything and you have a problem, whereas I'm saying, mate, you got to work with me, because if you don't let me know this, then how can I make sure that the car parks open to allow your click and collect shoppers to get in, and on it goes. So that's sort of one group. And then you have the other person where it's a mum and dad, and maybe it's a first or second shop, and to them, you're God. You're the guy they've got to pay the rent to, and if they don't pay it on time, they could lose their business, which could impact upon how they've financed it, which may be a mortgage on their house. So they're much more wanting to talk to you, and at a local level, that's a relationship that can be worked on very easily, provided then that the centre management, the landlord, the lessor, is smart enough to make time to work on that relationship, because that can be very let's say profitable for the landlord, because as it's your first shop, Damien, and you've built it with me and you're starting to make profit and you're feeling good, and because I talk to you every week when I see you, certainly every month, about the performance of the business, there's a trust there and there's a relationship. So my next question to you, after you've been there for 2 years, is, do you want to renew your lease now, Damien, earlier for an extra X years? Or, Damien, we're just building another shopping centre at X suburb. Would you like to be considered for another shop in that centre? And so that allows the landlord to really work on that relationship. And the worst that comes out of that is that Damien thinks, gee, Trevor's on my side and he's looking out for my future. I'll continue to work with this guy, which allows you to have a relationship then in terms of their future growth, which is what you want to do. And if nothing else comes out of that, at the end of the day, when that tenant's lease expires, at least he's going to renew with you, hopefully at a higher rent, which is what you're on about, because that's what drives your valuation. So in terms of the relationship between the landlord, the lessor, and the retailers, there's sort of 3 groups that it falls roughly into when you're trying to you have a different style or different approach to each of those groups.
Yep, great, good. Sue?
So again, just going to shift gears a little bit here, Trevor. On a lot of our episodes, we explore the topic of leadership, and generally we talk about personal leadership or individual leadership. We just thought it would be good to tap into the aspect of leadership that we haven't explored before. That's about managing large teams, and you've obviously managed large teams at Precision Group, at Walker Corp, and at Westfield. So what would be the biggest challenge when you're leading a large dispersed team, and how do you stay connected with them across the business?
Yeah, so important, Sue. You mentioned property companies there in terms of large teams. My view is if you've managed large teams in retail, then managing large teams in property is a walk in the park. And I'll use the example of, as a store manager of a Big W store, or as a regional manager of a Big W stores, where I had, say, 7 stores, and each of those stores with casuals, part-timers and full-timers probably had 70 people on the books.
Mm-hmm.
So if you bring that down to just being a store manager in a Big W, and you've got 60 or 70 people in that store that you manage, how do you get the message across to those 60 or 70 people? How do you grow the culture? How do you grow the trust with someone that maybe only comes to the store for 20 hours a week, once a month? Because that person is interacting with your customer, they're interacting with the rest of the team, their values, their views. You've got no chance of getting, let's say, under the hood with that individual. So it's very, very hard. What that does teach you, though, through managing those teams in those big stores, is that everything you say, every action you do is scrutinised, is evaluated by that 18-year-old casual that's there for 8 hours. He walked past me, he didn't say good morning. He looks like he's angry today. It might be the furthest thing from your mind, but that's how easy it is to influence positively and negatively people in those businesses. You then move across to a shopping centre, like when I went to Westfield Burwood, where my direct reports in that centre management office were about 6 people, and I've gone from where I had, say, 7 times 60, where I had 420 people, being able to develop a rapport with those people, it's so much easier because you've got the time. So to sit down with each of your direct reports and have a casual lunch, have a cup of coffee, tell me, how was your weekend? How's the family? Gee, this week we've got a big project on. We've got to get X happening and Y happening. How do you think we can go about that? The time is there for that to be talked through, and out of that comes relationship, out of that comes trust, out of that comes the opportunity to develop the culture. So the bigger the team, the less time you've got to spend with individuals, and of course it goes through other managers, and then your values and what you're wanting to develop as a culture is diluted just by the fact that it goes through more filters. Everybody adds their little bit to it, puts their view on it. It's not coming from exactly what Trevor's wanting to say. Whereas in the case of Burwood, where again your 6 or 7 direct reports, it's very easy for you to get under the hood and to build strong relationships with those people. And that's not that different. Even at, say, Precision, where there's numerous assets and assets overseas, where again probably half a dozen people, be the centre manager, the marketing manager, the facilities manager, the office manager, sort of the key people, to have a direct relationship with those people. But what you learn from dealing with those big teams in those big stores is it makes it easier for you to acknowledge those staff members' anniversaries, their birthdays, and those small things are so important. And in my diary at Precision, as it was at Walker's, every staff member's birthday, every staff member's work anniversary was in there. And on that day, I would always send an email to that person, thanking them for their service or congratulating them or wishing them a happy birthday. Now that's just a small thing. Most good managers will tell you, yeah, that's what you should do, but do they do it? Do they do it every day? Do they do it every time so that everyone feels that they're part of that group and part of that culture that you're trying to grow? So I think I've probably got off the point a little bit, but the managing of the large teams is more difficult. At the bigger the group, the smaller the group, there should not be any reason why the team can't feel very much one team, one family, know one another, respect one another, understand that there's policies and objectives and we have to win, but doing it in a way that everyone feels that they're all going in the same direction, that they're all respected, and that they all have a contribution to make to the team.
That's probably a good segue into your question about high performance.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about that when I was listening, and maybe I, we talk a lot on this when we talk to different people about culture, Trev. But that what I'm keen to understand is your great experience and great insight. So thank you. I mean, your perspective on how do you create accountability in a way that drives performance without disengaging people? Because I think that's quite often a tension point, which is actually we've got to lift performance, but how do you do it in a way that we lift performance, but it's also it's encouraging as opposed to shivers, Trevor's just raised the bar again. And we'll never get there. You know what I mean? So what's worked for you in terms of that tension between creating accountability that drives performance without disengaging people?
Yeah, it's funny you say raise the bar, because that was let's say it was as a joke, certainly at Precision, where my direct reports would say, I know what's going to happen. Once I get you're going to lift the bar again, and we would joke about it. Yes, well done, Damien. You got 100%. Now guess what? Next month we've got to get 110. I knew you'd do that. I knew you'd lift the bar, and it became well, what did you expect, guys? We're here to win. We're here to be the best. So you've got 100. So now why aren't we going for 100, 110? How are we going to do that? Part of the trust that you have to have, because you want to ask more of people every day without wanting to demotivate them, comes back to firstly having the right fit at the very first stage, at the selection stage. Now, if you inherit a team of a whole heap of people, then that's one approach. But at some stage, one of those people leaves, and that's where this right fit is so important. And when I touched upon my 3 years in human resources at Woolworths, which the majority of that time spent on recruiting, was such a wonderful opportunity for me to learn. And as I've gone through all those years of working and I've had a very happy and successful time, it's been because of the ability or the skill to pick the right people to fit with our culture. And that comes down to that whole recruitment bit. If you get that right, then all of that, what you're talking about, comes together, because you've employed someone that has the same values as what the business has, what this person you bring into the business. And if the business of the rest of it's not quite as you want it, and you introduce this new person that has the same value as you, well, there's another person that's going to help lead the culture in the direction and the performance in the direction that you want. But that right fit, that selection, I see it time and time again where managers are under pressure to get someone replaced. So there's always a rush. They tell the person about the job. The person tells them what they want to hear, and they say, okay, you're employed. There wouldn't have been anyone I employed at Precision that was one of my direct reports. It probably didn't go through 3 hours of one-on-one, no group stuff, one-on-one interview, where what I'm trying to do is to get under the hood and really get to understand what that person stands for, how they're going to work under pressure. Are they going to reflect the culture and what I want my team to be able to do? Because if you get that right, as in the case of Precision, where of my 12 direct reports, I think all other than 2 of them I'd employed like 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, they're still there, busting their butts because they're of the same ilk. They're extensions of what I stand for. And so that makes it very hard very easy, I should say, very easy for me to lift the bar because they're expecting it to be lifted. That's the type of people they are. They're lifting the bar themselves because we're of the same view, of the same values. But that comes back to that recruitment bit and being able to spend that time to be disciplined in that approach to ask those questions. They're going to not just get the standard answer, oh, yes, I work hard. Gosh, I don't know how many times you ask that question in an interview, you're always going to get the answer, oh, yes, I work hard. What you're looking for is what's, what that really means to that individual. So if you get the right person, and if you're setting the example as to what you believe is what we're trying to do for the day, that conflict of wanting more and not wanting to demotivate people, it just goes away because we're all on the same page. We're wanting to win. We're wanting to win. We're wanting to be the best. And in that interview process, that has to come across, that regardless of whether it's a big public listed company like Westfield or it's a small privately owned company like Precision, you as the leader of the team, you have to give the impression that we're winners. We are winners. You have to believe that we're winners. And I only want the very best people working for me. Now, if you have any doubts in your mind as to whether you're going to be able to fit and deliver and meet our expectations, well, let's talk about it now because neither of us want to make a mistake that you're only with us for 3 months and then we have to change. So this is where you start to get under the hood about what makes that person tick and what they're looking for. And out of that 3 hours, 2 1.5-hour conversations or 3 1-hour conversations, you start to get an insight into whether this person is going to be the right fit. And that right fit will be that when I say the height bar just got lifted, they're already expecting that. They know in their own minds that, well, geez, that's good. I've managed to do that. I've got 100. I bet he's going to ask me for 110. And when that comes, they just go, yep, knew that was coming.
You did that. Great answer, and I'll get Sue to answer the next question. But I think I just realised that I'm sitting up straighter now, Trev. So basically, subconsciously, you've influenced me. I'm sitting up straighter. So your question?
So, what would Trevor of 2026 in terms of advice would he provide to young Trevor? So, how would you describe your leadership style today, and how has it evolved, and what would you do differently, or what have you learnt that you would say today is a must-have that you wish you knew 20, 30 years ago?
Good question, Sue. I'm not quite sure the answer to that is clear. I think with experience, which means with age, comes wisdom. Because if you don't learn along the way, then you're a bit of a dumb bum. And with that experience, it comes a confidence. And just as the 18-year-old casual in Big W can make an assessment or an evaluation of you just by the way you said good morning to them, people can sense that confidence, that this guy knows his shit, this guy knows his stuff, and I think as a result of that confidence, then perhaps you're a better leader, a better communicator than what you were 30, 40 years ago, where you said something and got a reaction to it, whereas you think, oh, not so good, or that worked well, and then of course you trot it out 40 years later and it still works. So I just think that I would have been much more confident leader now than what I would have been then, just because time and working with people that were great, and part of that wonderful career that I had, it comes down to the people that I was there. And I talk about that time in HR. There's a man there called Steve Young who's still alive today. who would have to be one of the best interviewers, recruiters that I've witnessed. And I sat with that guy for years and watched him interview people, watched his body language, and he would say to me, no, don't cross your arms and sit back on the chair, use this tone, ask this sort of question. So from him through to having the good fortune to work closely with the likes of Stephen Lowy and Lang Walker and Sean Bonnet and pick up on the good bits out of those guys, it's got to make you a better manager than what you were when you kicked off 40 years ago when you didn't have the exposure to those people. So I think you get better. In answer to your question, Sue, as best I can say, your leadership style becomes more polished, becomes more effective, because you have the benefit of wisdom, you have the benefit of exposure to, if you're lucky like me, to some of the best people in the industry.
So if we pick up on that, Trev, they're focusing on leadership. What I'm interested in is, given your extensive career, what have you, and you've talked about this, clearly there's some, that authenticity piece, right? So what you were doing, connecting with the 18-year-old 40 years ago, you're still connecting with the people in the shopping centres and the like, and the great, habit of writing down birthdays and the like. What I'm curious now is around sort of, that leading at the top piece, and what do you need to do differently when you go from leading a function then to leading the whole business? As Chief Operating Officer of Precision, you had the whole business versus what's different about that, apart from the scale and the breadth, but from a leadership perspective, what's different?
The leadership that you would show in running a department, and let's say in shopping centre speak, that it's looking after the leasing team. All of the leadership, the good traits that you would do in that, trust, expectations, communication, building relationships with people, it just goes the same when you then move up the role. Hopefully you've had exposure to those different disciplines before you get the more general management role. But the good things that you did as a head of a department or as a store manager, as opposed to a regional manager, or as a centre manager opposed to a state manager of shopping centres. The good things you just keep doing it. I never thought that was that big a challenge, because the habits and the skills that you had to get you to that position, you just kept doing that. And I think the big thing out of all this, as in any relationship is trust. And to develop that trust is one other ingredient that I see in executive today that is not often talked about, but to me is the cornerstone of good managers, and that's courage. That's courage to tell the employee that things aren't working out, not just at the annual performance review, but any time that we see it. It might be saying to a 30-year-old that's in your team that I don't think that your dress is appropriate. Now, I could just let it go. Probably no one's going to say anything about it. Maybe, maybe not. But the courage to have that conversation and then to do it in such a way that the team member understands that I'm doing it for his benefit. I'm doing it for his brand, for how he's perceived within the business. The courage to say to someone, your performance is not up to date. So many managers I see are hell-bent on being liked. They're not driven by respect. They think being liked is a tick. Well, if you can tell the guy that he needs to have a shave or dress differently and still be liked, that's great. But you don't get hung up on that. What you want is respect, and that conversation and that courage that you need to have that conversation is where I see missing in a lot of managers today. And as we go through this period within our society where to offend anyone, to say to someone that there's a problem with something that they do personally, it's just easy just to let it go and to not to say. Now that doesn't build trust. It doesn't build high performance teams. High performance teams, as we are all mad sports nuts, you've got to take a big slice of that and bring it across to business. It's pretty simple. When the coach of the Melbourne Storm, when you're not performing, he says, you're in reserve grade this week, mate. And that's not, no one gives that a second thought. Yet in business, if I was to say to someone, you're not performing, you're going to get dropped from the side, it's like, whoa. Or you're not performing, your salary review is nil this year. Now, if those courageous discussions had taken place monthly, 3 monthly, whenever the issue was observed, then it maybe wouldn't have got to that. But again, because of the lack of courage, it just let it go. Don't say anything. We've got to concentrate on the big picture here. How are you going to take half an hour to tell a young executive that you don't think that his dress is appropriate? Just let it go. No one really cares about how people dress these days. And I use dress just as an example. It might be the way that he talks to other people and thinks he's being funny, but it's really irritating people. It may be any number of personal mannerisms. So managing big teams, managing little teams, being the header of a team or the leader of the big team, I think the traits are all the same. Perhaps as you get further up, that becomes more important because your technical expertise is no longer as important as what it was as when you were heading a department. You're now heading the team. So the management of the team is more important, and it comes back to what I think are the basics, like the right fit in the first place, the trust that has to be there. People have to believe that you've got their back. And then when you have that difficult conversation, it's all about, I'm trying to help you get better. I'm not just wanting to belittle you or put you down or make out like I've got all the answers. It's about us getting better. Of course, we're winners, and that sometimes requires courage, which you read so many books. We'll talk about trust, we'll talk about cultures, but we don't often see the word courage. And I think that's critical to a successful business person. And anyone that I put in my team, I would always give them the commitment that you will never have a problem with me telling you as things are, because I pride myself on having the courage to tell you exactly as I see it. And sometimes that's not going to be good news. But if you want to buy into that sort of culture, into a business where that's one of our foundations, then I'm sure you'll do well. But if that makes you think, oh, I'm not sure about this, well, then let's do both ourselves a favour and let's leave this conversation here right now. You're not going to be part of the team.
Okay.
Long answer, but hopefully I've covered.
No, that's good. That's great. I mean, and certainly when I talk with clients, we talk about you've talked about team dynamics and the Lencioni 5 dysfunction of the team, and the foundation of that model is trust, right? Trust to actually trust to have the conversations that not necessarily about what's happening in your personal life, but trust to go in and say, hey, Trev, I've got a problem. I need your help. Can you help me out? And then when you've got that trust, then it helps you. He talks about having, the conflicts. How do you have conflict in teams can be helpful. The way I sort of paraphrase that is then say, actually, and what I heard you say, how do you have real conversations? How do you have genuine, real conversations, which aren't always, pleasurable, for want of a better phrase. So. Sue, over to you.
I think you said we could talk for hours about this topic.
I know.
I'll probably
might have to get Trev to come back.
Yeah, we might. I just thought I'd give you some of my takeaways so that of today's conversation. So what I've heard loud and clear is obviously it's about relationships, trust, and courage, but more importantly, it's about authenticity and being genuine. And I think they're the themes that have resonated with me out of the discussion today.
Yep. Terrific, great. And as Sue said, Trev, we could keep on going. There's another 10 questions I've got in in my head, but we better wrap it up. I mean, and so what's a question without notice? The how are you? What you've just your advisor to Precision Group, and also then the opportunity to work with us at OMC Group as well. So your expertise, your experience is available for others if they want to develop retail properties.
Certainly, Damien. I mean, if that again, I go back to all those years at personnel in Woolworths, where it was about growing people and developing people, and I continued that in my time with those property companies. Right down to introducing staff development budgets, so that the budgets for the centres, in amongst all the other expenses, had an allocation for funds to be able to put people through external courses, or to have them spend time with consultants, and to be able to have funds to cover them while they went on those courses or spent times with those people. So to me, part of the whole what makes the job, or what can make the job so much easier for you, is simply getting the right people and then growing them. And sometimes you need money to do that. And that was in all of the precision centre budgets, where there was thousands of dollars allocated to allow the team to have money to be able to grow and develop their people. Because again, it's pretty obvious, if the teams are full of stars, then the bloke sitting at the top's he's going to look like a star too. And it's simply a matter of trying to help people, the right people, help them grow, and it's pretty easy after that.
Yeah, terrific, Trevor. Could absolutely keep on going, but really, really conscious of time. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Sue. We look forward to bringing another episode of On My Couch to you shortly. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about OMC Group and the work that we do, or some more information about the unique experience that both Trev and Sue have got in terms of retail management and retail development, have a look at our website, which is omc-group.com.au, and look forward to seeing you at our next episode. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Trev.